Good morning, everybody, and welcome to week 11 of the WQA CWS 1 preparation course. We are on our last leg of the last third, so we're getting close. Curious, and this is where I'm going to start talking about this a little bit, as to when everybody is going to be taking the exam and where they're going to be taking it, and whether or not I will be able to do anything to help as we get closer or anything. So please give me a call or give Jen a call and let us know what we can do. Shoot me an email, shoot us an email, and let us know where you're going to be taking the exam. I appreciate it very much. So as always, as I do every presentation I give, I want to start off by saying thank you. It does mean a ton to me that you guys are taking the time to do the certification and take the course. I'm honored to be able to serve you in this way, so it's always my goal to make sure that the information that I give to you is at least as valuable as the time you're giving to me. I definitely appreciate it. One other thing I wanted to mention here as well, we just started a new course yesterday, started week 1 yesterday, and it's a Wednesday morning at 8:30 Eastern. If you guys are interested, we do still have room in the class, so those of you that have already paid for the course, if you would like to go back and listen to them live again, then, I mean, you have the options of being able to do that. You just let us know and we can put you on the invite list for the Wednesday morning class. There is still room in that class, so you would not need to pay for that if you've already paid for the course. So if you want to go back through and listen to them, or you have the recordings also, you can listen to the recordings at your leisure. So, but that course is on Wednesday mornings at 8:30. Today, what we're going to talk about, a little bit about the bottled water industry, drinking water quality devices, cartridge, distillation, ion exchange, reverse osmosis, disinfection. I'm going to get on a soapbox just a little bit as we go through this. So, but this is one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about, this particular topic in terms of the drinking water and what our industry does. I also want to mention as well that I'm actually doing, thanks to modern technology, giving this webinar today, sitting in the phone lot of the Detroit airport waiting to pick somebody up. So I'm completely mobile, and everything seems to be functioning. I'm connected using an air card right now, and everything seems to be good. But if by chance we have technical difficulties, then bear with me. I'll be back on. So we seem to be good so far, though. All right. This is a picture that I put on it. I sometimes use this in, I have an iPad sales presentation that I use, and when I'm in the home with customers. And this picture, put this in as one of the slides, making reference to a study that was done in, or a newspaper story rather, that was done a couple years ago about a science school project that a kid had done that showed that the water that came from actually the back of the toilet was actually, had less bacteria in it than some of the waters that had been found at restaurants or city waters or in waters that had come from other sources. I thought it was kind of interesting. Now, I did want to mention there's a reason that dogs a lot of times will drink out of the toilet, or cats or kids, that kind of fish. I put a fish in the toilet once, but I don't think it was doing much drinking. I had that's where they go, I think, when they decide to sleep for long periods of time. I put a fish tank up to watch the fish swim around. I don't want to just see them sleeping. They're going to sleep, they're going down the toilet. That's just not right. But anyway, a lot of times animals, pets will drink out of the toilet not because, well, it's convenience, number one, I mean, the water source is right there. Number two, it's sat for a long time, which means that it's aerated, which means the gases like chlorine or some of the other maybe odors, other substances in the water that are causing odors have dissipated. And so the dogs prefer to drink it because dogs have a very keen sense of smell, and so it actually improves the taste. And so it's one of the things that, I mean, just to keep it real, to keep it realistic, that's why dogs often drink out of the toilet, for one of the suggested reasons anyway. In terms of bottled water, let me see if I have this. I don't know if I put this on my slide or not. Yeah, I did. Okay, let me go back. I didn't remember if I had updated this slide or not, but there are two general grades of bottled water out there that we normally see on the store shelf. You've got those with very low mineral content. That's usually either distilled water or reverse osmosis water. They usually have been ozonated as well, just to make sure that they don't have any bacteria in it. And like I said, it's either reverse osmosis or distilled water. Now, sometimes they'll re-add a little bit of mineral back to the water, like Dasani is an example that does that, where it's reverse osmosis water. That's Coke's version of the bottled water that's out there. And they'll re-add a little bit of mineral back to it for flavor. And then some of them are just have a really low total dissolved solids. One of the things I used to do when I was in sales was I went out to the grocery store and I bought samples of all the popular waters that were there and tested the TDS, and I actually had it listed on a piece of paper, because that was one of the common questions people have. I wonder what this is, or I wonder what that is. And I showed what some of those total dissolved solid levels were and some of the water that was out there. It was kind of interesting. The second is spring water. Now, spring water is water that has minerals in it. It usually has a high mineral content. Not going to hurt you. I mean, some people prefer the taste of spring water over reverse osmosis or distilled water because it does have those flavor minerals in there. And it's usually just, calcium, any minerals that are in the water. That's usually spring water. So they have treated. I mean, the bottled water industry falls under the same regulations, EPA guidelines as municipal systems. So they do have to meet those minimum drinking water requirements. Spring water does still need to be disinfected. Now, here's my little soapbox. I told you I was going to get on just a little bit of a soapbox here. Let me start this soapbox by saying that I am not anti-bottled water industry, not even close. In fact, without the bottled water industry infrastructure in place, when we had the hurricane come through in the East Coast and in the Gulf and the tornadoes down in the South, and I mean, when we have the natural disasters and the big problems like that in the country, without the infrastructure in place for the bottled water industry, we'd be screwed. I am a strong supporter of the bottled water industry. Also, doctors' offices, the 5-gallon reusable jug, you're not throwing a lot of waste into the landfill there. I don't think that it's realistic to think that Americans will ever completely eliminate the bottled water from their habits. I think that we like our convenience. We like to grab the bottle right out of the fridge, cold, and run out the door with it. But let me explain some of the costs for you, the bottled water cost. First off, a bottle of water can cost $1.50 for a 20-ounce bottle, and that's usually at any of the. You can find it less expensive than that at a grocery store when you buy a case, but it's not uncommon to spend $1.50 for a bottle of Aquafina or a bottle of water at a gas station or a convenience store. People do that all the time. This is kind of interesting. Now, this is the numbers kind of fluctuate a little bit. According to last year's WQA study, the number I believe was 63% of Americans are buying bottled water as an alternative to their drinking water, but it's always between everyone consistently is between 60 and 70% of Americans are buying bottled water as an alternative to their drinking water. It's usually give or take 1 or 2%. That comes out in that WQA study every single year. That means that a gallon of water, 1 gallon of water, if you're spending, that means that approximately 2/3 of Americans are spending up to $9 for a gallon of water. That's assuming 128 ounces in a gallon, which we'll assume that that's the case because it is. What that means is that we are spending $100 million a year, $100 million a year on, actually it's $100 billion a year. That's, there's an extra set of zeros there. So $100 billion, I mean, I feel like Carl Sagan, billions and billions of dollars on the bottled water industry, $100 billion per year. So how much is that? Well, we use approximately 70 million plastic water bottles every single day, with 60 million of those being sent to the landfills. That is a lot of plastic. Okay, that's 255 billion, 500 million that we're using, and 219 billion going into the landfill every single day. Every single day. Or I'm sorry, every single year. But if we're using 70 million a day, then this is every single year. Or if you want to put it into a smaller perspective, that means that we're throwing away over 41,000 plastic water bottles a minute. Every minute in this country that's gone by, we're throwing away 41,000 plastic water bottles. That's pretty significant. So here's my take on the bottled water industry. Well, let's talk about this too, energy costs. It takes enough oil to fuel 100,000 cars per year just for the bottled water industry. Now, you throw in plastics into that, all plastics. I've read that we use more oil and energy to manufacture, recycle, and transport our plastic bottles, all of our plastics in this country, when you combine them all, than we do in our residential vehicles. That's pretty significant. So with what we do for a living in the water treatment industry is way more than just selling water softeners and drinking water systems. It actually makes a global impact. And if you think about it in terms of a water softener alone, water softener uses 70% less soap. That means 70% less plastic to store the soap in, which means 70% less transportation, you know, the gas that it uses. I mean, there's a huge carbon footprint there. That's probably hard to measure in reality, but it's what we do does make an impact. But today we're talking about the drinking water side of it. And just in the bottled water side of it, we could power 100,000 cars per year with what we use to manufacture bottled water, manufacture and recycle bottled water. Air pollution, we're putting 25 million extra tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from the bottled water industry. So again, let me stress that it is not my goal actually to completely eliminate the bottled water industry, not even close. In fact, I strongly support the bottled water industry. I think that it serves a purpose in our industry. It is part of water treatment. I mean, when somebody is using bottled water, that is a quick and easy way to do water treatment. As we in the Water Quality Association and in the industry focus more on things like final barrier, which is it's the buzzword that we're using legislatively and throughout the industry now. We're going to be hearing more and more and more about final barrier. Final barrier basically says that it makes more economic and in practical sense to treat the water where the water comes into the home or where it's being used than it does at a plant, at a treatment plant. And so that's final barrier. It's going to be a lot safer and a lot more economically sound to do that, and that's where the industry is going. Bottled water is part of it's a final barrier option for sure. It is an option for water treatment. My goal is to reduce the amount of bottled water that we use in this country in half. If a family is buying 4 cases a month of bottled water, I'd like them to cut it down to 2 cases. Okay? I'd like them to stop using that bottled water for making coffee and tea and pasta and soup. I'd like them to put in a reverse osmosis system or some form of water treatment to produce that water right at their home. It makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot more environmentally sound. Now, types of devices that they have, final barrier devices. You've got your disposable cartridge filters. And one of the things I want you to recognize is that the pour-through pitchers, you know, I came into the industry kind of being told and being taught that the Brita pitchers and the Pure filters and the faucet-mounted, you know, things, that those things were kind of the enemy. They were our competition. I hope that as we go through this course and as you start to learn more about the industry, you come to see these things not as competition but as options. They are fine filters for as long as they are doing what they're designed to do. I mean, a 4 through 1 micron microfiltration unit is not a reverse osmosis system or distiller. It doesn't do it. So but they are definitely part of our industry. There's no question about it. So you have the disposable cartridge filters, you have distillers, the ionizers, reverse osmosis systems. So let's talk about the disposable cartridge filter first. They come in several different varieties. Some have carbon in them for chlorine, a lot of them do. Some have automatic shutoffs or meters, so you know when to change them. You see that. A prime example of that is the filter that comes in a lot of the refrigerators that are out there. They have a little light on them that tells you when it's time to change that filter. A little reset on there. So some of them have automatic shutoff, some of them have little lights on them, but that's not uncommon. They should be changed regularly. That's one of the problems, is that customers often won't change these things when they're supposed to. They definitely should be changed regularly, and the more stuff that's in the water, particularly if you're on a well, you know, if you're on city water with TDS of right around 100, then that's what that refrigerator filter is designed for, to take that chlorine out and you know, and kind of help the water taste a little bit better. If you're on a well water and you've got that refrigerator filter with 500 TDS in the water, that filter is going to, the more stuff that's in that water, the faster that filter is going to fail or going to clog. So, and it will actually start putting more stuff in the water than it's taken out of the water, because as the carbon desorbs, then you'll actually notice the TDS is higher. In fact, it doesn't take long for that to happen. Check the TDS sometimes coming out of the refrigerator, out of the customer's refrigerator, versus the TDS coming out of their tap, and it's frequently, almost always higher coming out of the refrigerator if they've been using the refrigerator filter for any length of time. You can install these things in parallel for higher flow rates, and one of the things that I like about having a cartridge filter on a lot of times is, especially if it's on after equipment. So you would put a carbon filter, for example, if you're on, you know, if you have this in the house, just to kind of polish up things. Even if you just have the housing itself on after your equipment, this gives you a great way to sanitize your whole house line, your entire water system line. Because it gives you access to your water line. So you can chlorinate your water heater, all your, you know, all the water lines through the house, because you can open those lines up, put a little bit of bleach in that filter housing, and run that through without having to bypass your softener or your equipment. In terms of a cartridge filter installation, that's if the best location for a carbon filter use is where the water is going to be used for drinking and cooking. So that's why you see that at a refrigerator. Sometimes you'll put it right underneath the sink. Sometimes they'll have a separate faucet on there. But these filters, you know, a cartridge filter, the kind that actually hook directly, what are the little faucet-mounted filters, you know, will hook right on the faucet. They'll screw on the bottom of that faucet there sometimes. That is a cartridge filter, same thing. So that you just will a lot of times have a switch that you'll turn it on for drinking or cooking water and off for washing dishes. So usually you have a big, kind of this big cartridge thing off on the side of the filter. It looks kind of ugly. Or sometimes they'll tap right into the water supply and go down underneath the sink there. This is your, I don't know where that's big. This is your parallel install. If you're installing them in parallel, and that's, now these valves are off, I noticed on this picture for some reason, so the water's not going to be doing much at all. But if you were to turn this on, then that water would come down. And the reason you would install this in parallel is for higher flow rates. You would have higher flow rates here. So water comes down and it gets here and they're like, oh man, which way do we go? I don't know which way to go. Tell you what, you go this way and we'll go this way. And they split up, and so these guys go down through here and they get filtered and they come back out for this guy, and they come over here, and these guys go down through here. Same thing, they come back out and they go over here, and then they meet back up in the middle. I'm like, hey, what did you guys do? I don't know. We just lost a bunch of our crap through as we had to go through all this black stuff. It was weird, but still a lot emptier now. Yeah, me too. All right, well, let's go on in and get drinks. And then they go on into the house like this, right? I don't know for sure if that's what the water says, but as usual, you guys have been with me now for 2.5 months. You know that that's what happens in my head. Whether it happens in real life or not, who knows? Okay, so a distiller. The way distillers work. Distillers do produce mineral-free water. They do also disinfect the water because they heat that water up, and no pathogenic bacteria can survive in hot water like that, in boiling water. So, it does disinfect the water. It works like the Earth's evaporation cycle. It just does it a little faster. And it uses 4 to 7 gallons to produce 1 gallon of water. So there is still some waste there. A lot of times people think that there's no waste at all, but there is still waste with a distiller. It needs to be cleaned because of the precipitate left when the water evaporates. So I'll show you that on the distiller here when we see that. But you are going to have buildup, all the TDS, all the stuff that's in the water. It is going to build up. You do have a buildup, particularly if there's calcium in the water. If you have a lot of calcium, you're going to get a crusty buildup because remember, heat exacerbates that reformation of calcium carbonate. So you do have a hardness of scale buildup more in heated water than you do in cold water. Distillers typically can produce 3 to 12 gallons a day of water, which is usually enough for a customer to drink. That's fine. But they do take a lot of energy because you have to have that heat constantly heating that up. Here's how a distiller works. Okay, so the feed water goes in, and it comes up through here. Now, this is a heat exchanger. It starts to heat. This little chamber right here does 2 things. Number one, it starts to heat up the water coming in, but it also cools the water going out. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. So the water comes up through here, and it started to warm up a little bit because it's cool. It's taken some of the heat from this water that's already been distilled, and it goes down in through here. Now, this reservoir, this water reservoir, you've got a heating element down here, and this guy is heating the water up, creating vapor. So this water heats up and it creates vapor, and you have steam or water vapor, and then you have a vacuum up here that sort of sucks the vapor up. So that was my vacuum impression. I know you guys were thinking, wow, Kelly actually brought a distiller vacuum right there so that we could hear what it sounded like. No, it was just me doing an impression. So it wasn't really the real thing. But anyway, it sucks sucks that vapor up in there, and it brings the hot steam, which Google hot steam sometime. You'll probably get a picture of a distiller, I bet. Just Google hot steam and look at all the distiller pictures that come up. So the hot steam, I feel like there should be some wow music as I say that. But anyway, the hot steam comes through this line right here, and then it starts to go back down through, just like, and then it goes through, because it's actually, even though this water is almost vapor, it's actually cooler than the hot steam, and so it starts to cool it back down as it's, so the water, and then it goes like up here. I just picture it holding its hands up, like on a roller coaster. It's like goes through here and then hands up, and then right here, and then right here is a long slide because it comes back through here, and this is where this water is cold, right? And so it really starts to turn the hot steam back into liquid, and it comes down through here. Now, the reason this works is because all that stuff that's in the water, the total dissolved solids and all that stuff, it's not going to evaporate because those are minerals. They're metals. right? So they're not going to evaporate. However, if you do have something in the water like benzene that evaporates faster than water, then you are going to get it. You're going to collect that. Jen, you can make fun of me if you want. So anyway, it is going to. I think I do a good enough job of it myself. I noticed everybody else was silent, just sort of staring at this, going, really? He's doing distiller vacuum impressions? Yeah. Why do we sign up for this course? How many classes do we have to go again? But at this point, you guys are already paid, so you know, I can be as wacky as I want, I guess. Maybe not. Anyway, so if you have something in the water like benzene or whatever that evaporates faster than water, then it is going to collect down there. So you do need to have a good volatile organic compound filter, and you know, something to take that stuff out at the end after it does collect the vapor. But it will be TDS free, and that's a big distinction between. I mean, a distiller has some advantages. Number one, it does disinfect. Number two, it is 0 TDS. You will not have co-dissolved solids in there. And, you know, that's different than reverse osmosis, which gives you low TDS water. It does not take 100% of that co-dissolved solids out. The ionizer, now we've seen these things, a lot of times these are disposable cartridge filters. And what they do is they combine both cation resin and anion resin, maybe in 2 separate compartments in one cartridge, or maybe they'll have a couple different cartridges, but the cation resin in one of the cartridges takes up a positively charged ions, and the anion resin takes up a negatively charged ion, and that also will give you mineral-free water. Now, it's not going to do anything for bacteria or VOCs or anything like that unless it has additional filters, but it will give you the mineral-free water. It's going to take anything with a, it's not going to do anything for organics. It's not going to take anything because organics don't carry a charge, so the resin in them is not going to work. But an example of that, I don't know if you guys have seen the zero filters. They have them at some of the stores. They actually a lot of times market them with the total dissolved solids meter. A little TDS meter comes with them. So if ever you lose or break your TDS meter, go buy that zero thing, and actually you'll be able to get a TDS really fast. But it does produce mineral-free water. Now the problem with some of those little ones is you got such a small amount, and if you're running well water through there with high TDS, it's going to exhaust the resin in those cartridges really fast, and there's no way to regenerate them when they're the disposable cartridges like that. So, you know, I think they're counting on the marketing sometimes for that stuff, because people test it. It's, oh yeah, it has 0 TDS in there, and then if they tested it a month later, they would see that that TDS is quite a bit higher because the little media in that thing's exhausted. But by that time, people are using it. They still think it works great. But they do produce mineral-free water. So there's and you can get some that, you know, it is going to be based on TDS, how much TDS is in that water, on how long they last. But they're usually replaceable cartridge, the ionizer. Usually will have a separate faucet, usually a mixed bed. They do require a deeper filter housing than your typical cartridge filter. Now, there are companies out there that do exchange tanks, deionizing or demineralizing exchange tanks. That is, I mean, you got to be set up for that, because they have to, the reason they do the exchange tanks is because it takes to regenerate these things or bring them back up to, you know, to speed, bring them back up to where they're able to deionize again. You have to use some sort of an acid, to usually uric acid, to regenerate the cation side of it, because you're using hydrogen to regenerate the cation side, and you have to use something like caustic, which has a lot of hydroxide ions, to regenerate the anion side of that. And that, you have to have special licensing and a special place for that, because those things are dangerous, they're toxic. So they'll do an exchange tank where they'll just bring that tank in and exchange it out however often is needed to. No drain necessary if you're doing that with the customer. They just simply unscrew one, plug it in, take the used one back to the shop, regenerate it, and then have a constant supply, a constant cycle of reusing the tank. You can put these in. I mean, these are bigger tanks, so you have a higher flow rate demand, and you can use these. You can put them in parallel also if you're using it in a commercial setting. Okay, reverse osmosis. Osmosis, which is probably the most cost-effective and efficient way of producing water nowadays, and probably the most prominently used in our industry in terms of giving high-quality drinking water. There are still distillers and deionizers and stuff like that out there, but I think reverse osmosis is, at least residentially, one of the most common ways of producing water. Osmosis was discovered by a French scientist in 1748. Nobody really did anything. Now, osmosis is a naturally occurring thing, so it wasn't invented. Osmosis was not invented. It just sort of happens naturally. It's how plants feed themselves. It happens naturally, and so they discovered it in 1748. Nobody did anything with it for like 200 years until somebody named Dr. S. Dr. S. I'm just going to say Dr. SS. Dr. SS at UCLA started working on artificial membrane. What they originally started working on it for was desalinization, so desalting seawater. I mean, you got places like California, for example, right now that have tons of water all around them, but it's all salt water. You can't drink it. So, I mean, California also has water shortages because you can not only drink it, but you can't use it for irrigation or watering the fields or anything because it's got too much salt in it. So they started coming up with this as an idea for desalting seawater. Took the movement of the water from the soil to plant roots, like I said, movement from soil to plant roots is an example of osmosis in nature. We didn't really start, and this is what's kind of interesting, is we really didn't start using reverse osmosis for residential until the 1970s. So interestingly enough, I mean, this technology is fairly new. What we're using out there, reverse osmosis systems, is fairly new, especially compared to, water softeners and drinking water systems. I mean, it's only been around for 40 years. And it used to be way inefficient. I mean, it was not uncommon once, even 20, 25 years ago to have a reverse osmosis that was a 15, to make 1 gallon of good water, it would take 15 or 20 gallons of feed water. Now, that reputation as being inefficient has still, I think it's still, people still think it. They haven't really stopped to think about it, but I've been in the business for about 15 years, and I can tell you there have been almost as many advances in membrane technology as there have been with cell phones. I mean, 15 years ago, do you remember the big Nextel bricks? That was the cell phone that I had when I came into business 15 years ago. And I remember having a 5-to-1 reverse osmosis system that was actually a pretty good RO. Now there are ROs out there that are 1-to-1. So for every 1 gallon of water they produce, it takes 1 gallon, they have to throw away 1 gallon of water. Now, there are still people out there that refuse to sell these things because they say they're too inefficient. So here's my response to that. Even an efficient toilet uses about 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water a day. And so let's say they use 1.5 gallons of water. Most people will use the bathroom, let's say 3 times a day. So if you have a family of 4, that's 4.5 gallons of water literally going down the drain each time they use the bathroom. Multiply that by 4 people in the house, and you've got, what, multiply 4.5 times 4, Kelly. Do that right in your head really quick. 18 gallons. thrown down the drain. Yeah, I went to Ball State. That was impressive, huh? But 18. So you've got like 15 to 20 gallons of water thrown, literally flushed down the toilet. And so if you have given an inefficient RO system, you figure the average family of four is going to use 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water a day. Even if it's a 5-to-1 RO, if they're only producing 2 gallons a day, they're only using 10 gallons, which is half as much as what they use when they flush the toilet. So, and when you consider the impact, the environmental impact of using bottled water as compared to a reverse osmosis system, it's a no-brainer. Makes perfect sense. So they have gotten way, way, way more efficient nowadays. Okay, daily water production has dramatically increased in the last several years. There are even inexpensive ROs out there that will give you, at least in laboratory settings, 50 gallons a day, which means realistically they'd produce probably 10 gallons a day in a residential situation, in most service situations. Just as a side note, the higher the water pressure coming in, the more water is produced with lower cortisol solids. So the more pressure you apply to a membrane, the better quality water you get and the more water you get. One of the things to note about reverse osmosis is it does not remove all the TDS. It gives you low TDS water. You should, now it's sometimes not possible to do this, but it will usually impact the warranty. If you don't, you should, if possible, supply the reverse osmosis system with soft, iron-free water. The calcium, magnesium, and iron, all this stuff is really hard on an RO membrane, so it will significantly reduce the life of the membrane. ROs should be disinfected prior to the reverse osmosis. So that's the other thing, is the reverse osmosis does not disinfect the water. In fact, you should not run bacteria through them at all. Okay, here's the components of a reverse osmosis system. Now, this is a generic version of one. They have different configurations. Now, here's the one thing that I want to mention also, is a lot of this is marketing. So you'll see things like, ours is a 5-stage RO, and then they're like, no, ours is a 7-stage RO. And somebody else is, ours is a 28-stage RO. You can count whatever you want as a stage. So much of it is marketing out there. So some people will count the faucet as a stage. Some people will count, they'll add an extra hose filter as a stage. So the idea is to really look at how much, just because you cut a filter in half and run it through now you have 2 carbon filters instead of 1, because you cut it in half and installed it in 2 separate places on the line. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, that doesn't really do a lot. The brains is kind of in the membrane. But here's a generic RO and the components that you find in most ROs. You got your pre-filter. Pre-filter is usually a 5-micron filter. Human hair on average about 80 microns in width, so this is going to take out about 1/16 the size of a human hair or larger. Just a pre-filter. If it's on city water, a lot of times that'd be a carbon filter as well. And in fact, here you have a pre-carbon filter. So you have a sediment filter, which takes out debris and sediment and stuff, and then you have a pre-carbon filter, which takes chlorine out, because on thin film composite membranes, which is most of the membranes out there now, the chlorine will tear up that membrane. So you got to run chlorine-free water through it. Then you have a post-carbon filter. Now, I'm out of order here. Usually the membrane, sometimes the membranes are down in these cartridges, but on this one, this guy right here is the membrane. Usually it will go, so it'll go 1, 2, and then you'll have the membrane 3, and that's the membrane there. Okay, so you have the membrane, which runs through the membrane. Then you'll go through this carbon filter after the membrane, so 4. Then you'll go into the storage tank, so which keeps your high-quality water, your low TDS water, separate from the rest of your water supply. And then from there, you go through a polishing carbon filter on a lot of times, so 6. And then if you're counting the faucet, that would be 7, right? You'd have a separate faucet on there. Now, some units will actually, they'll, from the membrane, go straight from the membrane into the storage tank. and then run it just through this filter as as it comes out of the storage tank, they'll run it through this filter. You can also add extra filters on a lot of these things. You can put alkalinity filters on them, so that after the storage tank it runs through that. You can put an arsenic filter on there, polishing, so that it runs through that arsenic filter, VOC filter, a lot of that stuff. Now keep in mind, most of these tanks are just like your pressure tanks. They are air charge tanks. So that was good. So they basically, what that means is just like a well tank. I'm trying to do this in the car with the touch now on my laptop. So you'll have a bladder inside of this, and this will have air on the outside of it. So that's why with the more pressure that's there, around that tank or around that bladder, so a 3-gallon tank will usually hold only a gallon to a gallon and a half of water. Okay, and as you start to use the water, you fill a gallon fill a gallon, make tea, and you fill a gallon pitcher up with it. You'll notice that water starts to slow down. That's because the more water you pull out of there, the less pressure is being pressed up against it, so the water starts to reduce. They do have water-on-water tanks, which use household line pressure to supply water. So, and those are pretty good, because it doesn't matter whether you have a cup of water in that tank or 2.5 gallons of water in that tank. You still have the same pressure, because you have a second line. Instead of having that bladder surrounded with air, you have it surrounded with water. To my knowledge, there's only one, maybe two manufacturers out there that do that. Most of them are air charge tanks. So I got good happy there. Okay. This is just a chart. Again, I use this chart on my digital presentation when I'm using it to show just the different filter sizes. So here's where reverse osmosis is here. Nanofiltration is here, ultrafiltration, microfiltration, particle filtration. If you guys want more details, you look here at human hair is down here anywhere from 30 to 200 microns. This is visible to the eye right in here. This is reverse osmosis, so you're looking over here at the molecular level, right? So it's teeny tiny. Microfiltration, your 1 micron, that's usually your Brita pictures and stuff like that. And if you look, I mean, that takes out a lot of stuff. That thing will take out quite a bit. It's going to take out your cysts, particularly, your Giardia and Cryptosporidium. Those things will come out with with one of those Brita pictures. That's why they are certified. I mean, they're microfilters. Here's another chart, a little easier to read. Okay, here's how the RO process works. All right, so if you have let's say you can take a fish tank, okay? Now this is osmosis, okay? Osmosis, so if you took a fish tank and you put salt water over here on this side where it's the unfiltered water, okay, and then you have on this side, let's say pure water, osmosis is a naturally occurring process. It says that, and if this was, you could flatten an eggshell. This guy right here was an eggshell. An eggshell is a semi-permeable membrane. So if you could flatten out that eggshell and stick it in there, that would work. You'd start to see osmosis. Now, what would happen with osmosis is the pure water on this side would move through this membrane and try and dilute the salt water, the unfiltered water over here, the high TDS water here. It would try and dilute it. So you would end up with less pure water and more unfiltered water, more water that has TDS in it, but you'd also have a lower concentrate of TDS, because this water would go to dilute, the filtered water would go to dilute the unfiltered water, okay? Now, the more TDS that you have over here, the more stuff that's in the water, the faster this pure water is going to push through that membrane. That's called osmotic pressure. Okay, so the more TDS you have in the water, the faster this goes to dilute it. It's like, wow, we got to act really fast to dilute this, and that's what they do. Okay, so that's osmotic pressure. Now, what reverse osmosis does is it applies enough pressure on the unfiltered side, on the TDS side, okay, get a question here. Is that a type of adsorption? Don, I missed that question. When did can you clarify where that is, where that's coming from? From the adsorption? Where is what an example of adsorption? I'll let you come back to that. But I want to make sure I get that question answered for you. So, adsorption is a surface phenomenon. Okay, so what adsorption is going to happen is something sticking to the outside of the surface. This process here is literally called osmosis. It's going to seep through there. So adsorption would be an example of a cartridge filter. That's what happens with adsorption, is the stuff sticks to the surface area of that carbon. So that would be the adsorption. This is actually osmosis. Okay? I mean that is the process of osmosis. So okay, so what you do here is you apply enough reverse pressure on the unfiltered water here, the high TDS water, that it forces that water through the membrane the opposite direction. Okay, what that does is it produces a higher quality water, more pure water, using pure subjectively, because remember it's impossible to have pure water outside of a laboratory setting. But it produces more purified water and a higher concentrate of TDS water. Now there's a couple things. You do get a buildup on this membrane here, which will foul the membrane eventually. This is why you have to have water. You have to have a concentrate exit out of the reverse osmosis membrane. You have to get rid of that concentrate water. That's why it takes 3 gallons of good water to produce 1 gallon. Or I'm sorry, 3 gallons of feed water to produce 1 gallon of good water. So you got to get rid of that concentrate, and all that higher TDS. The higher the total dissolved solids over here, the more pressure you have to have on that membrane in order to produce a reverse osmosis, because the higher the TDS, remember, the higher the osmotic pressure coming this direction. Okay, so you have to, the more TDS you have in the water, the more reverse osmosis pressure you have to have on that membrane. By the way, there is an advanced CWS course on RO. If you want to know a lot more about it, it's RO ultrafiltration. We do have I believe it's a 6-week webinar course, 5 or 6 weeks, I don't remember how many, but we do have that course pre-recorded online if you're interested in learning more than you ever wanted to know about reverse osmosis. It's there. Okay, so the RO membranes, the way they do this is they'll have you'll have an outer wrap, and then you'll have a mesh, like a screen in between that, and then you have the permeate collection material. All right, this stuff is almost like cotton. So basically, the feed water comes through here, and it seeps through this membrane. It's wrapped up like a jelly roll. If you've ever seen one of these, they wrap it like a jelly roll, and you have spacers in between it. So there's several layers of this reverse osmosis membrane. And as the water seeps through, it goes through these perforated holes in the thinner tube, which then comes out as a permeate. So the concentrate, all that waste, the high TDS water goes out this way into the drain, and the permeate, this goes into the storage tank and gets used for your in-use water, for the final product. Water disinfection, in order to qualify for disinfection, you should be able to destroy all types of pathogens. I mean, and remember, with reverse osmosis, it does not have a disinfectant on there, so you need to disinfect through UV or any of the methods we're talking about here, usually before that RO, if that's a concern, if you have a bacteria concern. I will mention, let me go back here, let me go back a slide, because the holes, people ask all the time, why can't reverse osmosis be used for bacteria? Well, the holes in the reverse osmosis membrane are small enough to take out bacteria. The problem is that there's some evidence that bacteria can actually grow through the membrane. So bacteria, if you look at it, a lot of times looks like this. Okay, so if that bacteria hits the membrane this way, no problem, it's going to stop. But if it hits the membrane this way, then it may squeeze through that hole. It also reproduces and can actually grow through that membrane. Worst case scenario, if you get a lot of bacteria build up on that membrane, then you create a film, which then is going to be a barrier that keeps water from being able to be produced. So reverse osmosis is not a good option for bacteria reduction. Okay, in order to be a disinfectant, it should be able to destroy all types of pathogens and in whatever number present in the water, to destroy the pathogens within the time available for disinfection. A disinfectant should function properly regardless of any fluctuations in the composition of the water. It should function within the temperature range of the water. It should not cause the water to become toxic or unpalatable. It should be safe and easy to handle. It should be such that it's easy to determine its concentration in the water. And it should provide residual protection against recontamination. Boiling water is one method. You should boil for at least 1 minute. You'll probably see that again somewhere, that the minimum requirement for boiling water is 1 minute. You will probably see that again somewhere. Don't know where that could be, but something tells me that you might see that 1 minute boiling thing somewhere again. No important waterborne diseases are caused by heat-resisting organisms. Ultraviolet light's another method of disinfection. It does work, works great. Imitates nature. The water has to be free of turbidity and color. Ultraviolet does not add taste or odor, but there's no residual effect with it. The light does gradually lose power too, so even though it's still lit up, doesn't necessarily mean it's still working. So a lot of them will have an alarm on it. Tells you when it's time to change that bulb. Bromine is used a lot for oxidizing or disinfecting swimming pools. It's not as bad on eye irritation or the odor. Chlorine is one of the most commonly used in the world. It's inexpensive, easy to transport. Should be removed from the water though. We shouldn't be drinking it, and it does absorb through the skin. It comes in a couple different forms. You got sodium hypochlorite, which is household bleach. It's usually 5.25% chlorine. And then you got the calcium hypochlorite, or the dry granules. It's about 70%. And if you want to know the difference, stick your nose in either one of them and just take a big whiff. And then make sure you've got somebody around that can dial 911, especially if it's the calcium hypochlorite, because it will burn your lungs up. So just so you know, Water Quality Association and Moti-Vitality, neither one sanction the idea of sticking your nose in a container of dry granules and taking a huge big whiff. Not something we recommend. But if you want to, then I guess it's up to you. Your nostrils, your respiratory system. They do come in liquid sometimes. They're usually the chlorine's fed through chemical feed pump. The thing with chlorines is it always results in trihalomethanes, which are known, it's a known carcinogen, and it's known to cause adverse birth outcome and cancer risk. Now, that does not give you permission to go out there and start telling people that they're going to get cancer when they drink their city water. But what I do recommend is, I mean, there's so much objective stuff out there. Education, places you can go, tons and tons and tons of places you can go to direct people to get their own information. If they come up with this stuff, come up with the ideas on their own, which if you direct them where to go to objective sources, they will. But don't go out there and tell people that they're going to get cancer if they continue to drink their city water. It's not your job. Chlorine, in terms of disinfection, there's 3 terms that you should become familiar with and know. You've got chlorine demand, is the amount of chlorine that will be reduced or consumed in the process of disinfecting or oxidizing the impurities in the water. Chlorine dosage is the total amount fed into the water. And then the chlorine residual is the amount of chlorine still remaining in the water after the oxidation takes place. Question on UV. And I explain what the book talks about with the steam from the UV being collected. I'd have to go back and review that, but my guess is that they might be using that as I mean, it's definitely going to heat up there, but I don't recall seeing, or I'd have to go back and review specifically what it's talking about. The only thing I could guess is that if it's heating the water up high enough that they're collecting that for either to run into a drain. You might have a drain that's running into a floor or something, or maybe they're using it as distilled water somehow. Maybe some of them have a distiller component to it. I have to go back and review that piece. I don't recall that specifically, and I don't recall that feature, seeing that feature on any of the UVs that I've been exposed to or put in. Stream. Okay. Did I read that wrong? No, okay, you did put steam. Okay, good. There for a minute I felt like, okay. It says the typical residential UV has something to collect the rays that are radiated into the stream. Well, there is going to be an inner component. So a UV is going to have an inner and outer, yeah, it's going to be a flow chamber, right. So it's basically, it's going to be like a silver or stainless steel chamber that runs through there. So the light that penetrates, it's going to be an inner tube. So you're going to have a box on the outside, and then the tube is going to run through the center of a stainless steel, usually compartment, that does help reflect that light back in through the water. My guess is that what they're talking about is and again, I'd have to go back and review specifically what it says about that, but my guess is what they're talking about is some sort of a reflective surface to make sure that the UV rays bounce back and forth through that water. So that it's not just the one side of it that gets radiated, that water bounces back and forth. Okay. All right, chlorine residual. You guys are challenging me here. You're going to not ask me like the square root of something. You're not going to ask me to multiply like 4 times, 4.5 times 6 or anything, are you? You're challenging too much. Huh? Okay. Chlorine residual is the amount of chlorine still remaining in the water after you've left everything. It's residual. Okay, after it's disinfected. Iodine, used in emergency situations. Not enough known about the human system. We used to use iodine when I was in the service. They give us these little iodine pills, and if in an emergency situation we couldn't heat the water up, we had to get water out of a stream. We'd drop an iodine pill in our canteens, and it would disinfect it. So maybe that's what happened with me, because I had to do that a few times out in the field. And since we don't know specifically about the human system, maybe that explains the water voices in my head. Maybe that's it. Could be a study. Copper does kill algae. It's not good for bacteria. Alkalis and acids. Disease-causing bacteria don't like high or low pH. If you're going to chlorine disinfect, a little bit more on that, it's best if the pH is between 6 and 7 pH scale. Disinfection is better with longer contact time. And then there's something called superchlorination. I always want to go, dun-da-da-da, superchlorination. It's a means to achieve greater disinfection with shorter contact time. But basically, it's where you put like a whole ton of chlorine in there, like all at once, like shock the heck out of it, and it kills the stuff a lot faster. You have 2 components of a chlorine disinfector. You have the injector and then the dechlorinator, which does the chlorine back out, usually a carbon filter. And if you're going to do this, you should do it before the retention tank, because that allows for more contact time. And that, my friends, is the end of week 11. Next week, we're going to be talking about equipment installation, and we're going to go through some water treatment questions and answers. Any final questions today? Use of chlorine, yes, we usually raise the pH. Yes, it usually does raise the pH. Yeah. Any other questions? That depends on how much is in there. It depends on, it's odd because chlorine generally we think of as being a base, because it is an oxidizing agent, but sometimes chlorine can actually read low on the pH scale, but it really, what it depends on, is that an issue? Typically on city water, you will see a higher level of pH, but it's but it's not normally, the chlorine is not going to normally take it up, really super high where that in of itself becomes an issue. You are going to take that back out. What it's going to depend on, remember what pH is. Okay, pH is water's ability to, an acid, it is water that has a lot of hydrogen in it, and it's seeking substances that want to bind those hydrogen ions. High pH, or a base, is water or a solution that has a bunch of hydroxide ions in it, a lot of extra hydroxide, and it's looking for things that want to bind with, or it's seeking out hydrogen. So the answer to that question is how much oxygen or hydrogen is already in the water or in the substances in the water that the chlorine is trying to oxidize. Generally speaking, I've not seen chlorine take the pH at a level where the pH itself becomes a problem. How many gallons of chlorine are needed to disinfect the water is something I do not have memorized off the top of my head. It is in when we talked about the filtration course, or no, it was in the disinfection advanced course. We did that class, and that was a I don't remember that off the top of my head. I will, if you'll allow me to, I will see if I can find that out for you. Okay. But I know that we talked. That's the kind of thing that I know we studied that in the advanced disinfection course. I don't have it memorized because a lot of times I put it in my head and I go, if I ever need to know that, I can go back and refer to that. That's not something that I use on a daily basis. So I don't know that answer off the top of my head. Any other questions? Thank you though for the questions. I appreciate that. You guys you're challenging me. All right, then I appreciate it, you guys. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week. 12.